Okay, so we are live. So as always, welcome to my audience, those watching live and those watching on the replay. My guest today is Viviana. Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
What happens to me is that we have these initial conversations. I don't actually get to say people's names because I just dive in and I'm so curious and I want to know all about people and I forget to ask their name or how to pronounce it properly. So oftentimes it's the first time I get to say your name is actually when we go live. So am I pronouncing it correctly?
You are
Oh,
perfectly, actually.
okay. Well, amazing. Okay. So, could you just introduce yourself, maybe a little bit of background about who you are, and any context you think is relevant for the conversation today, or anything that you think is important for maybe people to actually know about you?
Sure. So, as you perfectly introduced myself, I'm Viviana. I My professional background actually started in the support in a software company. Actually, my whole life has been in supporting roles. Um, I started working in support. I pretty much enjoyed one aspect in particular, which is to help people. And from there, I evolved. I stayed in the support segment, became later on a senior support specialist. And at some point, very, very early on my journey, I even had the chance to take over the team I once was part of. And that's how I discovered my second passion, which is actually leading people and supporting people from a different angle. So no longer the customers who scream and yell at you at the phone and need a problem that needs to be solved, but people that need another type of support. And I enjoyed it pretty much, actually, more than I would have ever thought. And I stayed in this until my recent job. I was also their head of customer support. So I was responsible for the department, but mostly for the people on that department and our customers as well. That's where my big passion lies in, I guess, in general, in helping people.
That's amazing.
Oh, and I'm
Thank you so
based in
much.
Italy.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
that's also relevant.
Which is also an important thing to mention. So there's many ways that we can go, and I was thinking in preparation for this conversation, because as always we have this initial conversation just to make sure that the thing that you want to talk about or I want to talk about actually aligns and the live makes sense. But something stuck with me from our conversation, and I want it's actually a compliment to you,
Okay.
because you said to me that you liked the lives that I was doing and you connected with some of my videos and what I was saying. And I'm really grateful for that because oftentimes we don't get feedback. And in the world of social media, you can get bombarded with a lot of, you've got to be the loudest, you've got to be a certain way, you've got to follow certain rules. And
Yeah.
the way that you spoke to me, it was just very genuine. You said that you liked my content and the way it was. And I went away from that conversation feeling very good because often we don't get the feedback. We don't hear the compliments and we have to motivate ourselves. And I'm okay to do this. I committed to doing this for a year. But there was that little spark last week. I think it was last week or the week before. I can't
Yeah.
remember now.
Last week.
Just it was really the right thing that I needed at that point in time, just to go, okay, because sometimes doubt creeps in and you think, okay, no one's listening. And I know logically people are listening, etc. But when you have someone that actually says they like what you're doing and and they resonate with some of it, is such a nice feeling because you feel that you're not alone, and that went a long way. It wasn't that I was in a depressive state or anything, but
No.
I carried that comment with me, and I just felt good about what I was doing, and it reinforced. And actually, last week I didn't have any guests available, and I'd always made myself accountable that I would do these lives, so I did 2 solo lives, and
Okay.
rather than feeling a bit crappy about myself and going, oh, you didn't have the guests lined up, etc., I felt very confident about going into that I would do these lives. And a big part of that is down to you. So thank you very much because you gave me the
Thank you.
inspiration and the confidence to do it. So, and this is something I think it kind of leads into our conversation today about being an introvert, or thinking that a leader is one thing and it can be many things. But as we'll jump into your side of the world now. So that transition from being in sort of client support, customer support, into leading people, was that a natural transition for you? How did it work?
Let's see how much time we have. I will try to keep the story as short as possible. It was never an aspiration of mine. I never imagined, and I would have never. I thought my career path was pretty much staying in support because I enjoyed it. Again, I liked helping people, and it's a very challenging job at times, right? But it's also very rewarding. You get people that are completely overwhelmed with the software they're using, and you are the only person that can help them. And so when you get this positive feedbacks of customers, in that case, telling you, oh my God, amazing, you saved my life, it's always nice. And I had never big ambitions in terms of like my professional growth. I was very lucky throughout my whole career to have had always amazing team leads, managers, directors that saw something in me that I didn't see myself. And the very first time was one of my early managers who said, hey, why don't you should progress, right? People are coming to you, you are knowledgeable, customers like you, your team likes you, maybe why don't we grow you into this senior support specialist role? And I was so scared because it was partially already people related, and I was like, I don't have the competence to deal with others, people's problems and lives. But this person, my former manager, believed in me, and she pushed me out of my comfort zone, which I initially disliked because, I guess there's a little bit this misconception also in terms of like introverts are not able to speak with other people, or they're not able to take care or lead other people. I would dare to say it's actually the opposite. We do this on a completely different level, on perhaps, I don't want to say on a deeper level, but yeah, I don't want to go too much now into this introversion topic, but so it didn't come naturally. So there was someone that believed in me, and then this manager decided to leave. And we were all super sad because she was a great people leader. And I remember after the announcement, there were people from within the team, so my former colleagues, coming to me like, you should apply, you would be a great team lead. I was like, stop it. And it was the first one, the second one, the third one. And I remember going home that same day, and then I started thinking about it, like, I could actually do it. I understand those people. I've worked with them for 3, 4, 5 years. I know what they're struggling with. I know what they need. The rest can be learned. So it didn't come naturally. There was a lot of support from other people, mostly other people that believed in me. And I was like, okay, I cannot disappoint them, so let's do it. And I ended up enjoying it pretty much.
What do you think it is that they saw in you as a leader?
The ability to understand what they need, not on a superficial level, but to really understand. Because quite often, and I now attribute this to the support roles in general, but I believe it's a topic that is probably more common in other departments as well. But people in support, at least what I experienced, and I was one of them, like to complain. I mean, you're dealing with people on the phone or via email that are constantly complaining, and it's natural that at some point you start complaining as well. And you complain about the systems, you complain about the difficult customers, you complain about new processes, and there were a lot of complaints, and I was not always, but most of the times able to filter these complaints, right? And understand, okay, are you currently complaining about this specific scenario, this specific tool, or is there actually more? And quite often there was more behind, right? So sometimes it was something in their private life going on. Other times it was just a workload. Other times they felt like they didn't matter, they couldn't contribute, they wanted actually to grow, but didn't have the courage to speak up. And so I believe that this ability to not go immediately into the panic mode, like, okay, there's a problem, we need to fix it, but sit down, deep breaths together, and now let's figure out why do you feel so overwhelmed, right? Why is there this need to complain?
Wow, yeah, I love this idea of being calm because um, I actually speak to a lot of people. So one of the outreaches that I do to connect with people on LinkedIn, I often ask a question: what is actually not talked about enough in leadership? And they sort of go on the side of resilience,
Mm,
and being open and honest, but also I've recently started seeing a trend of people saying, "Oh, being still respectful and calm as a leader,"
mhm.
because these are qualities that yes, we think of, but often I've rarely seen it. So someone else's stress, especially if it's a manager or a leader, becomes the team's stress. Um, and
Yes.
that has a much bigger impact. I often see it, there's one person and it floods down to everybody else and they're having then a bad day, etc. And the ability to create that little gap, like you said, and just say, okay, what actually is the real problem? You know, I found this in most conversations I've ever had with people where they're not angry. It can be just something going on. And I found through conversations, just talking, it's actually the
Mhm.
thing behind the thing that they're actually saying. And if you can create that space where people are happy to talk, you don't take that internally, you don't react. It's just okay, this is a nice space. You eventually get to that place, and then you go, oh, okay, it's this that we need to talk about, and that's it's not a nasty thing, but you just have to think, okay, it isn't always what you think is. Sometimes it is, someone's just angry at something, but
It
it
is.
goes
Yeah.
beyond that. So have you always noticed that? Have you always been able to do it, or is it a skill that you developed being in the sort of support role?
It's one of the things that I'm proud about because it's something that I fortunately didn't need to learn. I think it's just it belongs to my persona, to the way that I am. I was a calm child. I was a calm teenager. So it's like I'm a calm person, um, and I always enjoyed pretty much my whole childhood, teenager years, and adult life. I like to listen more than to talk, which is also why this whole life context is so scary to me because I'm like, no, I am the one doing the talking. I prefer to listen. Um, but so for me, it was always important, and I always liked listening to people and trying to read between the lines, right? Sometimes, and it's a little bit risky because you can easily start interpreting things that maybe are not even real, right? So you obviously need to be objective and listen really well. What I found is that often, just as you were saying also, right, it's just talking, not even addressing necessarily this big problem that came up, sitting down, talking as a leader. Listen more, right? Don't Obviously you need to ask questions, you need to dig deeper sometimes, but it sounds so simple, maybe even too simple to be true. But what I found is that most of the time, just by sitting with a person, letting them do the talking, and you just being present, listening, nodding, really understanding, right? Obviously not pretending, but really trying to understand. I don't want to say it's solving the problem, but it's definitely making things bearable for people. Just knowing, okay, there is someone that listens to me, they try at least to understand what I'm going through or what my issue is. And maybe I don't even need an immediate solution, right? But very often, or most of the times, for people, it's important that they have someone that they can talk to. They know that they will do their best to solve whatever challenges. Sometimes there isn't an immediate solution, that's also fine. But just being there, being present, showing them that whatever is currently going on matters, that you're willed to take this matter on you and find a suitable solution.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's often so simple that we overlook it as a skill. This ability just to listen to people, and I 100% agree with you. A lot of the times, people don't want a solution. They don't need anything. They just need a moment to talk, to let out whatever's going on, and it can be something deeper, of course, but it can also be just that they're having a bad day and they need to talk and they need to reset. Excuse me. One of the things I used to do, I used to be this thing called a chief happiness officer. And I used to take people away from their desk, and we'd go for a walk. And where we were based, there was a park nearby or some fields. And we'd go for 30 minutes, sometimes longer. And we would just talk. And getting someone away from their environment, it can be just a simple thing that technology is not working, and, it's you're having a bad day and then there's stuff on top. Technology's working, can be simple as that. And you go, oh, I hate my job or whatever. By the time we'd come back from the walk, people were like in a completely different sort of, what I say, headspace and thinking about things. And they would be very grateful for the conversation. And to be honest, I hadn't really done anything. I just gave them an opportunity to get away from the desk where they were currently seeing the problems, go and get some fresh air into their lungs, see some nature, come back. And minimum, it was about half an hour. Sometimes it went on for an hour, but it allowed them to reset their day. And then you could just see that they're so happy. But often in work situations, we don't have that. We just, okay, we're told just to sit there and put the headset on and just get on with it for 8 hours and sure, have a break, etc. But you have to deal with it. And you go, what happens if I can't? And just like you said, that skill of listening to someone. We think we have to come up with all these crazy schemes. No, just sit, listen, and show that you're intending to listen to that person. It goes a long way.
And I believe especially in leadership position, we tend to forget that, yes, we are their boss, right? And we are responsible to a certain extent. And but at the end of the day, we are dealing with a human being, as all of us are. And the basic human needs, be it in a relationship, be it with your family, with your siblings, or with the team that you need to lead, it's always the same, right? I remember when my parents, when this was quite some time ago, but they once told, when I moved in with my boyfriend, they told me never go to bed mad at one another. Always try to talk. Talking is so important. Listening to the other person is so important, right? And that's one of the things that is applicable, yes, in your private life and your relationships, but also with every other interaction you have with a human being, right? And to the example you made before, I remember when at some point, I don't know how this whole thing started. I was doing my one-to-ones. We had a nice terrace in the building we were working. And so I started attending this one-to-ones. We were still in the same building. We were still at work, but we had the one-to-ones outside. I remember, I don't know if she's also attending this event, but my former colleague who I shared the responsibility of team lead with, remember she once asked me why I'm doing them outside. And I was like, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. It just started. And then some people saw it. And then other team members were to me like, oh, I saw you had a one-to-one with person A outside. Can we do the next one also outside? And at some point, I started noticing that although we were still in the same building, we were still at work during our office times, just being out of the office, out of a meeting room, people were more, I don't want to say willed, but I believe they were just more able to open up. It's just like the one-to-one it's always been a sacred space, right? And like going out to have this one-to-one, I don't want to say it was a form of therapy to a certain extent, right? We were out of those office walls. We had on other days an amazing blue sky and sun, and people were in a better mood to speak up. And often those one-to-ones didn't last 30 minutes as planned, but they went on over and over and over again. Whereas in the meeting room, most people after 30 minutes, you start opening the windows if you have, and then you want to go out because it's getting tense. So I can totally see why just going away from this current situation, be it a technical issue, be it you being overwhelmed, it doesn't cost much. It doesn't need a lot, but it's really, it can make a difference, a big difference actually.
It's like you said, costs nothing, and it has a huge impact on our outlook, literally, physically and mentally. And it's it's so underrated. And I don't have that much input into the corporate world. But when I was in it for about 20, 25 years, and I didn't see much of it. Yeah, we'd go and get a coffee, but normally the coffee was in the building, and it was like, oh, okay. And yeah, just going out, it just it enables you to think differently. And anyone that's listening who's in a leadership position, I would definitely recommend it, just even as an experiment to try it and see what. Even for myself, it allowed me for my mind to wander and to think about not necessarily the questions, because they came quite naturally, but sometimes it would allow me to ponder. And I think when I was walking, there was this nice rhythm with my breathing and the walking, and it was, and you see things, and you can say, okay, look over there, or something, and it really changed the dynamic for the person, but for myself. And it's the easiest thing in the world to do. I think maybe what restricts people is that they think, oh, you're going out of the building, so it's unprofessional or something like that. And I would always argue against that, in terms of, whatever's best for the other person is professional, and that's and that should be the priority. Just coming back to something that you said about being an introvert in terms of leading. So, and you touched on it, and I want to dig a bit deeper, and I know we kind of skipped over it, but I actually, it felt, so if I'm saying this incorrect, because it felt you were heading this way, is that sometimes you feel that being an introvert is actually makes you a better leader. And why I want to dig into that is because I agree. And so if I'm putting words in your mouth, please
no.
me. But we live in this world where it seems that to be a leader, we seem to be on show. We need to be the one talking in a meeting. We need to come up with all these ideas, etc. And it seems very, I want to say, culturally or society, this is the way. And, especially on social media, you'll see all these people leading the way, and and you go, oh, okay, yeah, you've got to be this outgoing, extroverted person that's always visible. Yet, in my experience, the best leaders are the ones that sit there quietly, pay attention, and that can be seen as introverted. And I don't know. I mean, we can get into it, but I don't know where introverted and extroverted sit, because I've wrestled with it myself. Because so the last time I've described myself, I said I'm an introverted extrovert, which the reason I say that is because most of the time I'm quite introverted. I'll go and speak to people, but it takes me a little while to warm up to people. However, in situations, I can be the person that goes on stage. I can be the person that hosts this channel, and you would imagine that that's okay, that you would maybe label me as like an extrovert. But what I found over time is that I can be both of these things. I can be an extrovert and really outgoing. I try not to be arrogant with that. I try to it for benefit and for good. But soon after that, I basically go back into my shell like a snail, and I need to go and just be by myself. I don't need
recharge.
Yeah, it's really something. It's quite, and I at one point I thought it was maybe me being false, but it wasn't. It was just that I had a skill set within me that I could reach into when I need to and just pull it out. And it doesn't mean I can do it all the time. It zaps my energy. So I'm thinking about we went on this leadership training course, and we had to do a lot of speaking, standing up in front of people. And when that whole day had finished, I literally wanted to leave the building as quickly as possible. I didn't want any chit chat. I had to go back. I didn't want to interact. I just wanted to be in my shell, just introverted, almost put my headphones in. And so at first I thought, oh, I'm being a bit fake or something, or I'm not naturally that person. But what I realized is that I can switch between those when it's necessary. And it wasn't fake. It was just that I've got this skill set and I can be this other side, and I can switch when I need to and when it's important. But we have this, oftentimes we think one thing, you either have to be an extrovert or an introvert. So I know that about myself. How do you see yourself? Because, I know it's a bit scary to think that you're coming on camera, but there's something that tells me
Yeah.
that, you said, we've talked about this being out of your comfort zone, but you've pushed yourself. So I know when things are important to us, we push and we go the extra
Mhm.
mile, but you are also able to show up for other people. So, but do you consider yourself an introvert, or where do you see yourself in all of that?
I still pretty much believe I know that I'm an introvert. The thing is that for the longest time, I didn't even know about what is introversion versus extroversion, right? I remember maybe I was 18. There was a friend of mine, and there was an event I didn't want to go because I was like, too many people, too loud. And she's like, oh, and her husband is also an introvert. And she's like, oh, you guys are the same. You are such introverts. And if you want, then it's fun. You can have fun and you can be very enjoyable. And other times you are like completely in your shells and don't want to go out, and you are scared of even, saying a word. And that was the time where I was like, okay, what is actual introversion, right? And then, there's such a wide range, right? And introversion, same as extroversion, comes in different forms. Someone is an extrovert. We immediately think of an extrovert, of someone that is always loud and has always something to say. But an extrovert can also be a little bit quieter. And there are introverts that, depending on the situation, can be very outgoing. What I found for myself, and actually I once read there is a term, I believe it's called ambivert. So you adjust based on the situation, right? So naturally I'm an introvert. I'm fine being alone. I enjoy being at home, reading a book. I don't need this outside stimulation as much as maybe other people. But it doesn't mean that I'm antisocial, right? So if I have my people, right, I can be pretty fun and pretty social, and I can talk and speak, or if it's the right cause, right? So one is the environment. I need to feel comfortable. I need to feel safe in order to speak up and share also more of myself. The other one is the cause, right? If I know that there is a valid reason to speak up. I make a very practical and real example. Typically, when there were bigger team meetings in the leadership teams, right, and there was nothing for me to add, I was quiet during that time. There were other people that always had something to say, which was fine, but for me, there was no real reason. If there was anything unclear, I would ask. Otherwise, I was basically sitting there for 45 minutes listening to the news. But if there were topics where I had previously feedback from the team, or I saw things going into a direction I didn't like, then I could speak up, because there was a cause that mattered. It was a thing that I didn't want to left unspoken, right? So I was able to speak up, because in this moment because my team wasn't there, I was representing the team. So I felt responsible for the team. So I knew I needed to speak up and talk. Doesn't mean that I liked it, but I did it. And then I can also be then very convincing and stand my point if it's important enough, right? To summarize it, I consider myself an introvert, in the right situation, with the right people. And I said this to you last time, right? It's a challenge for me, this life, but I felt right from the start so comfortable with you that I was like, if I'm going to do this, then it will be with Colin, right? Because I was like, I'm feeling comfortable. I feel like there's a genuine connection, right? And then I feel it's still scary, but I feel more comfortable doing certain things, right? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's you've said quite a lot, and I was, as you were talking, I was imagining my working career, and I think so I'll just touch on this point before I get into the kind of how it shows up in the office. But we seem to be in this world now that everyone has to say something. So when you were saying, okay, you were happy to sit there for 45 minutes and listen to other people talk, and unless there was a point that you either disagreed on or you wanted to put across, then you were happy to sit there and listen. I was thinking how productive meetings would actually be if everybody had the same rule for themselves, because I feel I've attended so many meetings where it's just gone round and round in circles. People have just said stuff because they felt that they needed to or should, which actually didn't have any value and derailed it. And it's okay that everyone agrees. And I think if there's silence, okay, then there's silence. But I also then believe that when you speak up, when there is a moment where something needs to be said and you say it, that has even more power, because if you're a person that just goes into every meeting and just talks over everybody, like it's just effectively it's noise. Do you know the cartoon Charlie Brown?
Yeah.
The teacher just has this wow 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 noise and you can't actually understand what they're saying. Reminds me a bit of that. And but actually when you sit there and quietly, and it's not that you're not paying attention or anything, you're listening. But when you do say, I think it's super important that the people around you need to listen. And I think this is often misunderstood, and like people, the dynamics in all of this become sort of messed up. People are talking when they shouldn't do. They're not listening to other people, but the people that actually are thinking about things. And I've often also seen where people are asked for their opinion and thought there in the meeting, and you're given like 5 seconds to come up with something, and just brand new information thrown at you, and you've got to come up with an answer. And especially when there's more people, there's a lot of pressure on you to sort of say something and come up with something enlightening. And you go, but so I think one of the things that makes me quite introverted is that I'm quite thoughtful. I overthink. That's not necessarily the best side of things. But I'm very considered in what I do and how I do it. So putting me on the spot freezes my brain, shrinks it, and yet there's this expectation. And so this leads me into my bigger point of all of these dynamics within a company, and we have these roles and responsibilities. And there seems to be this sort of way of doing things. And I think actually just understand how that person best works and operates, allow them to be that way, because you'll get so much more out of them in meetings, in everyday life. And I think being introverted as a leader, you take that distance. You're not reacting to anything, and you can come back even with a much better solution. But oftentimes when there's this, someone in charge of those meetings, that they want to get through all their points, and you go, well, hang on a second, you've just given me this now, and you've had loads of time to think about it. You haven't really put an agenda together. Now you're throwing it in my face, and now I've got to come up with an answer. So there's some trauma in there, if you can tell. But
I can relate.
But I think we have these preconceived ideas of how people should be, and especially in this leadership role. And I think, for many years now, people confuse manager and leader, and manager is just sort of managing people, but leaders actually, I feel, are ones that sit, almost in the team and understand people, take that distance and just go, okay, look, I can see this person needs a bit of encouragement, etc. But in companies, we seem to get it wrong, when we take very good leaders and we train them up almost like in a military kind of way, that you've got to do this and this and this. And I think there would be so much more benefit if we readdress that and allow people to be introverted and show up as a leader in a different way, and understand people as people, not trying to necessarily put them all in all of these boxes.
Yeah. And besides that, I agree to all of that. Just a remark to this, because when you were sharing your story of like being put on the spot, I hated it. It's not that I dislike, I really hated it when there was a meeting and people would ask, Viviana, you were so quiet, can you say something? And I was like, no, I don't want to. There is nothing to say, right? But because you are mostly surrounded by people that maybe speak even over somebody else, which in my opinion is disrespectful, but that's another topic. Or people that just say something for the sake of having something said, or say something that was already said, but then they repeat it. I believe that silence is it's not negative, to be honest, right? If there is something that matters. People will come to you if you give them the opportunity. And maybe it's not right at the end of this meeting, because overthinkers, and maybe some things you just need a couple of hours to land and for you to realize and process what you just heard. Give them the opportunity to say, hey, it does need to be here on the spot. If you have some feedback, thoughts, opinions you want to share, my door or my calendar is always open for you to book a meeting, right? I actually lost again my train of thought. There was something that should have come with that. Anyway, silence is nothing to be afraid or scared of. And the other part of it was around introversion. Yeah, I don't know.
But on that point, it's actually made me think about it when you said silence isn't something to be worried about. I'm just thinking, for those people that do all the talking, do you think it's very uncomfortable for them to sit in silence? I'm just wondering
Maybe,
wondering why they need to talk all the time. And I'm thinking about so many meetings I went to. It's just like, oh, okay. And I think they would be much more efficient if they just said, okay, look. And I think also it's a misconception that if you don't care if you're being quiet. It can just be that you agree, or you have nothing of more value to add, and everything's been said that needs to be said. And so it's a big I think misconception, and that this way that we approach it, and everyone has to be this certain way. I think it can. I think if we addressed it in companies differently, I think companies would be a lot better. So I floated this idea a few times on the live. So that people, I believe that. So if you take my introverted and extroverted nature, we put people into positions and we say, right, that's your job. Let's say 5 days a week. I know some people work less than that. Some people obviously work more. But say there's someone in the sales team. In my extroverted side, okay, I could maybe work in the sales team. But actually, if I'm doing that 5 days a week and that takes a lot of my energy away, actually my introverted side is probably screaming out and says, oh, okay, I'd like to do something else. And I thought about this idea of not necessarily having like one job title and that's what you stick with. But say if you worked in sales and then, 2 days of the week you worked in like the coding department or development or something like that. And it seems unnatural because you go, well, these are two different things, but actually they play to strengths. And if you understand sometimes how the back end works or anything like that, then you could actually maybe be better at sales because you understand it. But also it can match with your energy of how you are and how you show up. But we don't have jobs like that. Jobs are very structured, and I would like to see companies experiment with it. I don't have all the answers. It's just an idea that I think would allow people to bring more of themselves to work.
When I said before, I'm living in Italy, right? But this only the last 3 years. Before I worked and lived and was actually born in Germany. And I remember when I actually had my very first job, we had this apprenticeship of 2.5 years. And within I believe the first 12 months, I don't want to say something wrong. I believe it was 12 months. You were checking, first of all, it was also a producing company, right? So they're producing their own stuff. So first of all, the first 3 months, right after you started, you were in production. You were seeing from how is the product actually created from, that's the first step to the last step until it's ready to be sent over to the customers. And then afterwards, you were undergoing, because I knew I wanted to be into an office job. But I had the chance to actually explore for 6 weeks or 8 different departments. So I was in the finance team, I was in the post office, I was in the sales as well. But it was a mix. It was a little bit sales, the position I ended up with, but it was not cold calling, it was people calling you and wanting an advice on what they should buy. So it was a little bit easier. And I thought that was actually quite interesting, right? Because I had the possibility to discover an office job, but at the same time also I was with the IT team even, right? Where I knew it. That wasn't my world, but it was still interesting. So besides acquiring a lot of skills that I could use later on my job, right? I had the possibility to choose, right? Because I knew I wanted to go into this team, but I could have ended up with enjoying the accounting department actually. And I would have had the chance to say, you know what, I will stay here instead of proceeding elsewhere. And I know talking about it, it's always easier said than done, right? But I could see this like this, maybe even exchanges, right? That could take place on a regular basis, maybe once a quarter, where people from sales and finance team or finance and marketing team could just exchange, because I believe when you start doing your job, you become at some point super good in doing whatever you are doing. You also enjoy it, but maybe you have other skills that never came at the surface because you continued on this path, right? At some point with 20 something, you decided you want to be in accounting, and that's fine. But maybe you are a sales I don't know, a salesperson, sales guy. You just never had the chance to explore these skills because you have been doing now what for the last 15 years accounting. And I believe it could be also interesting in terms of like giving people an opportunity to explore their own strengths and maybe see what are other departments doing. If it's not helping and people will still decide to stay in whatever team they came from, at least you create, and I believe that's even more important, you create an understanding between the different teams. What I feel is that, and the bigger the company is, the more you see it, that you are one big company with one big goal, but there are, at the end of the day, different departments working autonomously, right? And talking from support, we were always complaining about the sales teams, right? And I know that the sales team was complaining about support, and then there was finance complaining about both of us, right? I remember I had also a team lead who once said to me, it's important to have connections in the different departments, right? And to exchange, right? To let them understand why you are doing certain things, right? And have them also explain to you your point of view so that you don't create these barriers at some point, right? So yeah, I believe it could be great if we could see something like that in future where people could explore maybe different areas, and why not even uncover that actually they have another passion beside what they were currently doing. So
yeah, it's it's strange because I mean I left school a long time ago, but when we had something called a careers advisor, and
okay.
basically all that meant is that you answered something like 20 questions on a very basic computer system, and in the end it said you are suitable for office work, you are suitable for working outside.
Same.
Probably about 4 or 5 different things, and it was like, what? So actually, when I didn't go to university, I basically applied for a load of jobs in London.
Mhm.
And I took the first one that was given to me. I didn't have, everyone says, why do you want to work for this company? When you're starting out, you just want a job, but
Exactly.
that apparently that's not a good answer. You go, I will do the best job I can, but I just need a job. And it's not through desperation, but it's this strange, almost like this dating scenario where you have to say, oh no, because I see myself in you, and it's very strange. You should just be able to be honest and say, look, I'm out of university, I'm out of school, I need a job, I need experience, I'm happy to take this job, you're going to pay me, you'll get something. And it should be just honest, but you have to do this weird dance of, okay, it's it's fine. But with that, and to your point, is that we often fall into jobs and to situations through necessity or something like that, and we don't explore. We don't have that ability to explore. And so I know that a lot of people, especially my parents' generation, they did a job that they started, 30, 40 years prior, and didn't actually look left or right because they got good at what they were doing because they've done it for 30, 40 years. But And then I was thinking about you in your scenario. You went from client support to being a leader of the team, and that actually materialized, fortunately, throughout your team. It wasn't that you had to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
But just imagine that works when you go and visit all these other places, like you said, like these other departments. And I think we don't invest enough in actually going and seeing, because people think that it's often, Simon, oh no, we're under resourced, we can't afford to put someone else in another place. But just imagine that you take someone and you put them in a place where they come alive. They're absolutely 100% perfect for that job. What value can that add to the company, to the person, to everything, the people that they're around? It's literally like, I would say, like screwing in a light bulb and everything comes alive.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We just go, no, right, you sit in that seat, you do that. And again, it's very short-minded, because we haven't had that exposure. Oftentimes when we move jobs, unless you've done like a big wild move to something completely different. And I think that tends to happen maybe later on in people's career, because they've maybe got to a level and they go, okay, I'm going to try something else. But most of the time, you kind of follow a linear-ish path. And unless you're working in maybe a small company where there's, you get to do multiple things, and, maybe a startup. And I think that's why people do like startups, because they get to touch on multiple
Different
things.
areas.
And but I think, yeah, that route of just going and doing a tour and having, and like you said, at worst, what you've got is connections with people. You understand them better. You can have better conversations. You know who to go and speak to when there's a problem, or who not to speak to, which is often
Yeah.
the thing. And yeah, we don't do it. And I again, most of the time, I think it's a resource thing, or I don't know if the companies just think it's more hassle than it's worth. What's your opinion?
Probably. I was also thinking, why we're just talking about, like, it's linear, right? So once you decide at some point, be it after university, after school, at some point in your life, you're like, okay, I need a job, because I believe that's applicable to, I don't know, 85% of the people. There are very few people at a very young age that know what they want to do, right? It doesn't matter the degrees you got, you believe you know what you are going to do, right? But ultimately you haven't done it before, so you will find out if that suits you or not. But once you started a job, like in my case, support, right? And when I moved away, I was taking a look at job descriptions, and I was like, okay, I want to switch companies. Let's see what's there. And my first thought was obviously like, okay, I need to stay in support, because I gathered now these experiences the past years. But even if I would have tried, I didn't try it, so maybe it could have worked. But even if I would have wanted to apply somewhere else, right, the job description have certain requirements, right? And they will be like, at least, so if you want to all of a sudden become a sales representative, most job description will tell you need to have at least 2 to 3 years experience in B2B or B2C sales. Or if I want to, because that's one of the things where, like, oh, I really like the people aspect, maybe I could go into an HR role, right? But the requirement list is long, and I don't fulfill most of the stuff that they're requesting, right? Be it starting with the studies to having had experiences in HR before. So I feel like once you start your career path, it's quite hard to move out of this path you are on and maybe discover other areas that could be suitable or not. The only chance you have is, and I believe that was a very good example that you mentioned with a startup company, where things are not too strict yet. So you can have the possibility there to start in support, but end up doing marketing, because at some point there was a free position in marketing. You always enjoyed marketing. The marketing team says, you know what, come, we will train you on the job. You end up enjoying it. And should you ever decide to leave this company, you can use your last reference, which was in marketing. Otherwise, you are basically stuck with the first choice you made when you were super young, and you need to stay with it basically your whole life.
Yeah, I have this opinion about job descriptions that I think they're just written as like a wish list for Christmas. It's just like, yeah, I want all of
Yeah.
these things. And I had this discussion actually with a coach of mine, and I think it would be actually better to look at attitudes, and so not hard skills necessarily, but something different, because I think oftentimes, so when someone leaves a team, they, people put a job description that's either been reused for many times, or they just basically write down all the skill sets that person that was exiting has. But then you're just replacing someone, and you're looking for basically that person. Now, the sad part is you're trying to replace that person. Why did you not hang on to that person in the first place? You've let them go. Did you not
Good
invest
point.
enough? And it might be that they're gone. But also, it's a great opportunity to see what's missing. And I heard this a while ago. It was about hiring for attitude rather than skill set, because systems are systems. Yeah, they can be a bit complicated, and yeah, I know that there's some certain systems that can be very complex, and you need sort of background in maths or something that's important. But most of the time they're logical systems, and there's an input, there's a process, there's an output, but it's how you approach that. And I think if you have the right attitude to learning and to connecting, but also those soft skills, and I think this is, it comes nicely back to this whole introverted piece, that I think even in interviews, they can be such a moment where you don't get to show your skill sets off, because you're in a room, maybe being interviewed by one person or multiple people, and again, you're trying to explain who you are, etc. And that's very difficult. If you're introverted by nature, you might not be the sort of person that says, oh yes, I'm this and I'm this. And you kind of go, people are overlooked purely because they didn't, they weren't talking loads in an interview. But actually, if you understand, and again, this comes to your point, when you understand a person, you have a conversation, if you put them at ease and they feel 100% comfortable, they will tell you who they are. And if you're wise enough to see beyond all of that, you can really get some amazing candidates. And if they are introverted, great, they might be a better fit than the extroverted person that's going to talk over all the meetings. So that I know that's a generalization.
No,
Please,
obviously we don't want to
all
offend.
all extroverts, please don't hate me on the internet for that. But it's I think it's, as interviews can be such a scary moment, and especially as you talked about in a job that you might not even feel comfortable because it's slightly different than the thing that you were doing before. So yeah.
I have one good example. It's a couple, but when I started my leadership career, I don't know when I received my first leadership training. I believe after a year or so, because anyway, it took a little bit. So my first year basically was going blind, hoping people would give me feedback if I would mess something right. And I remember shortly after, I believe 2 or 3 months after I was officially promoted, I had the chance, my team received 5 new openings. So it was my first time hiring and interviewing. I didn't know what to do, right? So the only thing I knew is like, okay, I will contact. So there was first the HR call. So HR was already doing the first screening, and then the first interview with the hiring manager, and then there was a final one. And I remember I had this was a phone interview at that time. And I remember I was probably even more agitated than the candidate, because I was like, what should I ask? And I was like, you know what? I will try to be the interviewer that I wish I had. So someone that is putting me at ease. I will not ask them about their skills, because if I like them, there's still the second interview to check their technical or whatever skills are required. And it was also my very first hire. And I remember I was talking to her, and then we got along, and I remember the phone call ended with like, thank you so much, because it felt like talking to a friend. And ultimately we ended up hiring this person. And what I wanted to say is I hired a couple of times for the skills, right? Because people had amazing skills. We needed exactly this person where I was just like, you know what? Maybe we will not become best friends, but you have amazing skills that I need in this team, so I will hire you, right? And I hired people with 0 skills. Well, not 0 skills, but 0 skills that were matching this position that we were replacing, and I hired people for attitude. And obviously the start, if we put the person with the skills and the person without, the start for the person without those skills is obviously harder. They need to spend more time in learning the systems, learning the jargon of this whatever industry we are from. But ultimately, there's a point, maybe after 6, after 8 months, where both are on the same level, right? And the skills, yes, you can build on them. You can learn more and do more, and yeah, but the skills, they fade. I don't want to say they fade after a while, but the person without skills will eventually at some point be on the exact same level with a big plus, which is the attitude that brought them in, right? And attitude, as I said, is something that I believe certain things can be learned also along the way, but certain things you simply don't or do have. And if you hire for attitude, you will rarely be disappointed. I was never, fortunately, when I took this decisions. I remember once we hired someone that had a completely different background, a teacher. So 0 experiences in software, 0 experiences in customer support. And I was like, if she can deal with kids, she will be able to deal with customers. Best bet ever. So
Really?
Mm-hmm. She's still working at the same company that I hired her for. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's I love the idea that actually from different industries, because again, I came from finance in the corporate world, and people kind of hired, sort of within. But I think when you hire in different industries or different sectors, they bring an even a greater perspective, because things are done differently. Like jobs are the same oftentimes, but they're handled differently in different ways. There might be different systems or different processes behind them. But actually, if you can sort of cross industries, what a great thing for you to learn as a person, but also for the company that you're coming to, that you can bring all this knowledge, and you can change things and go, oh yeah, we've been doing this because like the banking sector doesn't really change. We say, oh, we're innovating, etc., but it doesn't. It's all quite slow. But actually, you have a way to look elsewhere, but we don't. We kind of get tunnel vision. So that's amazing that you did that. That's I love that example. That's that's perfect for me. One thing that keeps playing on my mind as we're having this conversation. So my introverted side basically allows me to sort of sit back, and I seem to be able to see patterns and see things. And I never really thought about that. I just thought that people did that anyway. People could just see things, and I don't mean I see dead people like the Sixth Sense, but I see things that patterns in people, the way things are, and I see oftentimes like the bigger picture that's at play, not just the thing that's going on. And I just assumed everyone was doing that, and then through conversations with people, I realized that I actually have this skill set to be able to do it. And I'm wondering, because the more that you talk the introverted side, do you think that's a skill that's comes from being introverted because you take time and distance? Do you think all introverted people are like that, or is it just you and I? Because I can see it in you.
But I was like, that's definitely an introverted thing, but I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I can't really see how this could be a special skill that comes with being introvert. But I remember I had similar thoughts years ago when I was wondering why certain people were not behaving the way that I would have behaved in a certain situation. Like, how can they possibly not see where this all is leading, right? And it's when I took over my leadership position, this was one of the best experiences, not only because I had the chance to explore that I liked being a leader, but also I had the chance there was a huge support team, and we were 2 team leads promoted at the same time. So I had a second team lead that was completely different leadership style, but we also had so many similarities, and I could talk very openly to her, and we were often exchanging because she was seeing things from a different perspective, I from another one. And at some point we relied on one another, right? Because I was relying on her. She's also an introvert, right? But different. She comes in a different form of introversion, but also introvert attributes. And she was able to, at some point, because she was still a team leader, but she was more distant from, let's say, my team, she was able to see things that at some point I couldn't see anymore, and I did the same for her team, right? So we were able to support one another also. And I remember I found myself in situations with other leaders, or in general with other people, where I'm like, can you not see that there's a pattern, right? There were employees that, this is a classic example, but I believe every leader knows a person like that, that tends to be sick in a regular cadence, right? Or tends to come into the office late on certain days. And obviously, we said it before, talking and listening to this person, that's the way to go. But there were people that were just like, this person is actually a high performer, right? So they can basically do whatever they want because they drive results. And it was driving me crazy and mad, because I was like, why are you not seeing what this person is doing? There's something wrong. It's not fair towards others as well. But yeah, to get back to the question, actually, I do believe it's an introvert attribute, to be able, and I believe that's also a thing that comes for most introverts, I believe and hope, is that we like to observe people, right? And not in a creepy way. When I say I like to observe people, people could easily misunderstand. No, I like to observe you completely judgment-free, right? I like to observe people's behaviors, people's responses to certain things, right? Because I want not only to listen and see what they have to say to certain scenarios, but I also want to see how their body responds, right? And we all know there are those typical body signs, like crossing your arms, that typically is like, something isn't going too well. But I want to, especially when I lead someone, I'm not judging. I will always try to not judge any person. Doesn't matter if I'm leading them or not, but I take a couple of weeks and months of time to really observe and even scan you to understand, now in your case, who is Colin when he's normal, when he's relaxed, when he's angry, when he's frustrated. So that at some point I have kind of a body scan, and then I can easily tell in a year from now, in 6 months from now, without you needing to come to me and tell me, oh, I'm having a bad day, I can anticipate it and make also the conversation for you easier, and start, for example, a one-to-one and be like, Colin, I noticed the last couple of weeks you have been more distant or more silent, and then mention whatever this difference was from your normal behavior. And typically you get amazing conversations when you do that, because people will open up. They appreciate that you notice these little changes that to most people go unnoticed, right? Because every person, every human being, every adult at some point learns to mask themselves, right? And put on a mask depending on the situation. And that's what I want to avoid, right? I want to create this space, be it as a leader or in general as a person, where people don't feel to need to wear a mask, at least not when they're talking to me.
That's fantastic. I was captivated by what you're saying. I was like, wow, if you were my leader, then I would have been so pleased, because that part about seeing someone and taking them in as a whole, just over a period of time, and not just based on the first interaction, but also actually talking to someone and noticing. Because I think even we often say, oh yeah, no, I'm fine, etc. But being seen and being listened to, and we've talked about being listened to earlier on in this conversation, it's just so powerful, just being recognized, that you matter, and that someone is paying attention to you. Honestly, it goes so far. And having you as a leader, I would imagine, would be absolutely fantastic. I
hope.
Yeah, I love that, because again, we entered into this conversation talking about leadership, and there is this preconceived ideas that people have to be a certain way. And throughout this conversation, I was always convinced that introverted people have so much to offer. And I think often the thing is that they may not believe in themselves because they look at other people and go, okay, that person's, you know, extroverted, and I sort of sit in the sidelines. So it's easy to overlook ourselves, and so we don't put ourselves in positions of, okay, I'm going to go for this because, you know, we don't want all the attention maybe on the spotlight. But the reality is there's so many benefits from being in a position, you know, as an introvert, for yourself, for other people, for the company. And so I think if there's any companies out there listening and, you know, they're struggling with their leadership, you know, have a look, you know, what type of people have they put into those positions, because there's definitely a great alternative. And I think, I think that's something really people should pay attention to.
And to every maybe introvert listening, it took me quite some time also, and that's also why the whole reason why I believe I never envisioned myself as a leader, because the leaders that I saw were extrovert, or at least what we would define an extrovert, or what I would define an extrovert. So they were always loud, always busy, always in a hurry, right? And they never stopped talking, and they always had opinions on everything, and they always had an answer. Doesn't mean that the answer was correct, but they always had an answer, right? So I was like, I'm not that person, so I'm not a leader, right? And when I was, again, that's why I said earlier on, I was lucky enough that I had, and I know many people don't get this opportunity, but I had amazing leaders seeing something in me and wanting, and again, I'm so lucky, I know that I am and was seeing something in me and promoting this, like, okay, you are different, but I see the value you could bring to this team, right? With not being an extrovert, and with being and working with me on becoming an adequate leader. So not, and it's not, it's a little bit of an identity change, right? Because certain things you need to do as an introvert, which you don't like, but you will learn how to deal with that. But what I can give as a suggestion, and it's a thing that I started quite late, which was last year only, I started working with a coach. I was initially like, coaching, that's not for me, right? I'm doing this job now long enough, I know what I'm doing. And I was so surprised about how much of this introversion I was actually still carrying with me. And I would even go that far and say that if it wouldn't have been for this whole coaching journey I've been on, I would probably not be today on this call with you, right? So kudos to all the coaches listening or not listening and watching later on the recording, and to introverts specifically, but in general, I would say get a coach. Be very picky if you need to find the right coach for you. So do discovery calls, get a coach. It's an investment worth taking.
Yeah, I love that, and I think coaches are amazing. But to your point, the right coach, because I think there are many coaches out there. Not all are created equally, and I often think that find a coach that's been through something. So you scream out to me to be a great coach, so I know maybe that's something you sort of digging into, and we can touch on it in a second. But I'm conscious of time, because we could talk all day. But I think you know, oftentimes social media is often one of those things. It's a blessing and a curse. I always say this: social media has allowed you and I to connect and to have this conversation, so I'm very grateful for it. But at the same time, we're bombarded with images and portrayals of how people are, and we think we have to measure up against that. And I think, you know, if you find a coach or someone that's been through or is similar to you or understands you as a person, fundamentally as a person, and can help you move to the direction that you would like to go, that is amazing. Don't go for a coach that is the exact opposite, because they won't understand you. They'll push their agenda on you. And so doing the background research, finding the relationship, finding that the person sees something in you. Again, that might be an introverted person that just takes a little bit extra time. But yeah, it's fundamental. I think, you know, we underestimate the value of a coach. And I've had lives about this conversation, you know, in football and everything like that. We have coaches constantly, and, you know, in any sort of sport. Yet when it comes to business and everything else, we go, oh, no. And I actually think that companies should invest in coaches, external coaches for their people.
Yes.
And not force it on people, but allow people to go, okay, look, these are the people, and pay for that, because the benefits, are far greater than you will see. Because, and I wrote a post about this morning. Some things are intangible, but you will see it, and over time, and it's just not instantly. So, I think that's an amazing point to end on, because if we don't, we're going to carry on.
I know.
But that idea of a coach is amazing. But I would also say that you are probably one of those people that would really help a lot of introverted people as well, be that under a heading of a coach or just someone to reach out to. So, which leads me on to my final point: where should people come and find you? Because if there are people listening now going to want to get in contact with you, and where should they best find you?
On LinkedIn. I keep saying this on my posts. I don't want to call myself, because obviously I didn't do anything around that. I don't want to call myself a coach or a mentor. I could maybe be more comfortable with being a kind of a mentor to someone. If someone is struggling currently in considering to become a leader in mid-management specifically, because that's where I've been leading my whole life, my whole career, I'm more than happy to exchange, share my thoughts, my opinions, be supportive, because again, I do strongly believe that maybe I will not be able to solve the issue, the problem, but just sitting down with someone that understands you, that went through a similar journey, sharing their point of view, sharing their perspectives. It's not solving anything, but it's helpful knowing that, and that there is somebody that is trying to understand you, that is willed to help you. And to get back to what you mentioned, social media, I have a love-hate relationship with it. Love because of LinkedIn, because I'm like, it's a great platform. Sometimes I'm also annoyed, because I'm like, okay, there are so many people sharing advices and how great they are, and I'm still here with my few followers. But those followers that I have, I know they are real. I prefer to grow slowly, but with real people, real connection, people that can really relate with what I'm sharing. And so for me, it was a great exercise 1.5 years ago, because of my introversion, everything. And even before my coach, I was like, I need to do something to reinforce my self-esteem, to know that what I have to share matters. And I started writing and posting on LinkedIn, which was super scary as well. And at some point, now I don't want to say I'm a pro, but I'm just sharing. I'm no longer overthinking. If you're not already posting on LinkedIn, post on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn, Viviana Malva. I keep writing it, and I really mean it. My DMs are always open. Don't come at me and try to sell me a strategy on how I can grow my network, because I will not be interested. But if you want an advice, someone just to listen to, I'm here.
Amazing. So I'm going to pay you even more of a compliment now, because so in preparation, obviously you said on LinkedIn about having this conversation. There were a lot of people that were in support of you, and more than I've seen before, and that already sort of made me pay attention, because there's a lot of people in your corner. And again, to your point, we can have many followers, but that doesn't mean anything, because those people might not be the right people for us. And so followers is, yes, it's okay, a metric that we can look at, but don't allow that to be something that defines us, because your following may not be that huge yet, but I would imagine after this conversation, and the more conversations you put out there, that people will like what you are and how you come across. But you already have that following, so that speaks volumes, and people that are prepared to put a comment on what you're posting. So that's very deep, and you should be very proud of yourself already. And just continue that, and where you go, and just follow on from there.
I will, and thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Honestly, this is a pleasure for me. It was great to share and to get your opinion. I really loved it. So fantastic. I will repost this, and I'll obviously put your @ mention on here so people can find you easier. But obviously, as you said, you're on LinkedIn. But For today, thank you for your time. Thank you for showing up for me. I do appreciate you. It was a very interesting conversation, and
Thank
it helped
you.
me understand a bit more about myself. So, which is always
That's
great.
always
So
the best. Yeah.
yeah,
My favorite
exactly.
type of conversation. Thank you, Colin. Amazing host. Really, thank you so much for this shared experience. So thank you for the
Yeah,
hand holding, also my first
maybe
live.
no, I'm sure there'll be more coming your way. So, but yeah, we'll stay in contact for sure.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks very much for your time, Viviana.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.